The main cause of every war lies in economic sphere. It has always been this way and it will never change. All nonsense such as fighting for democracy or freedom or any other Western values. The goal of this gibberish is to hide the truth from you. Focus attention on something that has no meaning at all. Don't let the mainstream media to deceive you. It's been almost a year since the war started. Now you can clearly see who makes a huge fortune on this venture. These are US and UK-based private corporations in the three main sectors: liquid natural gas, weapon, and oil. The profit of such companies skyrocketed. Another huge benefit for the U.S. economy is the removal of European manufacturing companies from the global market. Since manufacturing activity is very dependent on the energy price, the production in Europe becomes unprofitable, and companies have only two options: either suspend operation completely and go out of business or move to United States to survive. Friendship turns out to be a costly endeavor for European Union. Weapon makers spent $2.5 billion on lobbying over the last 20 years, employing, on average, over 700 lobbyists per year over the past 5 years. That is more than one for every member of Congress. Do you think they give money for nothing in return? Some lawmakers also have investments in military companies. Of course, they want their stock to grow as high as possible. War profiteers aren't interested in peace, they're interested in getting new contracts and selling more weapons. Every conflict brings more cash flow. In a March 25th interview with Harvard Business Review, Greg Hayes, CEO of Raytheon, said, "Everything that's being shipped into Ukraine today, of course, is coming out of stockpiles, and that's great news. Eventually, we'll have to replenish it and we will see a benefit to the business over the next coming years. War in Ukraine is a wonderful time to make billions." Defense budgets are booming worldwide as countries replenish stocks sent to Ukraine and try to boost military capabilities in the face of mounting security threats. Germany, which had been committed to pacifism since World War II, declared that it had decided to spend over 100 billion euros on its military. European gas market seems to be a pretty sweet place. It is $100 billion market. The problem is that the liquid natural gas offered by U.S. companies had a few disadvantages over the natural gas: high price and complex infrastructure requirements. How would you force a buyer to purchase the product of similar quality but 40% to 50% more expensive than the competitor's offering? It is obvious that no one in a free will would agree to accept this deal. You would accept the one only if there is no other options available. Nord Stream 2 goal was to double the gas supply from Russia directly to Germany. The completion of the project would mean the closing doors for US and UK LNG suppliers. US hated the idea from the very start and imposed a vast number of sanctions with a purpose to stop the construction of the new pipeline completely or at least delay it. All these sanctions were heavily criticized by the European Union representatives, but had no effect on the policy of United States. The construction on the pipeline was completed in September 2021, but it has never started operation, awaiting regulatory approval from Berlin and Brussels. With the beginning of the war, the project was completely frozen. On September 26, 2022, there were explosions that severely damaged the pipeline and made it inoperable. The explosions took place in the economic zone of Denmark, NATO member. Of course, Western politicians blamed Russia right away, without providing any evidence. 30% of the oil used in the EU came from Russia in 2021. The Russia hold a pretty strong position. As usual, you only have two options: to make more competitive offering or remove the rival from the market and make an enormous profit. What do we have now? After 1 year of war, U.S. oil exports to Europe at an all-time high. Overall exports from the USA to the European Union increased by 52.2% in the first 9 months of 2022. Someone has to fill the gap anyway, right? U.S. oil producers have raked in more than $200 billion in profits. ExxonMobil made $56 billion in profit last year, its largest annual haul ever.
Exxon made more money than God this year.
Chevron earned $36 billion, also a company's record. With the ban of Russian oil from European markets started on December 5, 2022, the perspectives of the oil business are amazing. Keep in mind that an instability caused by the war allows these companies to make pile of money on domestic U.S. market as well. It is a gold mine, indeed. You may wonder why Boris Johnson and British government so desperately tried to support Ukraine from the beginning of the war. The UK's military, humanitarian and economic support to Ukraine since the invasion has reached nearly £4 billion, with $2.3 billion as a military support alone. And the support is not going to stop either. Why would they do that? Of course, to support freedom and democracy. At least, that's what you've been told. The real reason is a little bit different: to allow its energy companies to fix the highest profits in their history. Keep in mind that all aid to Ukraine is being funded by the UK's budget, which mostly consists of simple workers' tax payments. So, basically, ordinary people pay to allow historical profits of energy companies. It is sad to know the government uses money for the benefits of big corporations, not common voters. You may think that this is just an accident and all those companies just took advantage of the situation. Indeed, you have been told by the media that Russia started all of this for no reason, even though West tried everything to prevent the war. Let's inspect the question more deeply. The description of NATO as a purely defensive bloc is another lie. When someone constantly includes new territories, deploys weapons and forces, and develops military infrastructure on them, can it reasonably be considered a defense? In 3 rounds of enlargement between 1999 and 2009, NATO accepted 12 new countries in Eastern Europe. For the 2 decades of NATO enlargement, NATO came closer to Russia, not the reverse. What about the Yugoslavia bombardment in 1999 that lasted for 78 days? Joe Biden had passionately supported the violence back then.
And when I was in your position, I was suggesting we bomb Belgrade. I was suggesting that we send American pilots in and blow up all the bridges on the Drina. I was suggesting we take out his oil supplies. I was suggesting very specific action.
The material damages are between $30 and $50 billion. As a result, Serbia, which had been poor, became even poorer, unemployment increased, and wages decreased. But that was just a defensive action, right? Keep in mind that Yugoslavia had not attacked any NATO member, yet this did not stop this defensive alliance from launching an offensive war on Yugoslavia and bombing civilians. And how did the media react on this? Massive bombing attack opens the door to peace. Or consider Libya. The Gaddafi regime launched no attack on a NATO member. However, that did not stop this defensive alliance from launching an offensive war that completely destroyed the country and started several civil wars no one talks about. The whole game started back in 2008 when the NATO decided to give status to Georgia and Ukraine. The question of NATO expansion has been very sensitive and vital for Russia, and this was a trigger of war conflict in Georgia back in 2008. So, the problem is not new at all. For years, Russia asked to stop an expansion, but without any effect. The people in power had about 13 years to address the issue, but they preferred to escalate instead. Since the 2014, the U.S. has provided $2.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine. How would U.S. reacted if Russia would eventually started to provide military assistance every year to Mexico or Canada and conduct joint military exercises every year near the U.S. border? I don't think that U.S. governors would support this idea. Another proof of unwillingness of Ukrainian and Western politicians to calm the situation is the decision to refuse the implementation of Minsk II agreements that were signed back in February 2015. Ukraine's officials openly criticized the agreements. Later on, Angela Merkel openly admitted that the Minsk Agreement were meant to give Ukraine time and put the conflict on hold. This can't be called a diplomacy. This is a sabotage and lie. In December 2021, 2 months before the invasion, Moscow laid out calls for the U.S.-led NATO alliance not to admit new members or establish bases in former Soviet countries. Russia had demanded security guarantees that Ukraine would never join NATO and that the alliance stops its eastward expansion and the complete implementation of the Minsk Agreement. Russia clearly stated that this is an existential question and must be addressed immediately. Why wouldn't you provide a written guarantees to someone to ease the tension if you don't plan any offensive action against them? Why wouldn't try to calm the situation and avoid the potential catastrophe? In Jan 2022, instead of finding a compromise, NATO announced it was dispatching additional fighter jets and ships to Eastern Europe plus 8,500 troops, triggering an angry response from Russia. In addition to this, U.S. Secretary Anthony Blinken declined the core security demand. From this moment, the war became inevitable. As a result, Ukrainian people were intentionally sacrificed as a pawn to reach the strategic goals of big corporations and politicians. But mass media don't want you to see the whole picture. They only show you a small fragment to construct your reality. Support of Ukraine's democracy and freedom is very profitable and fruitful for Americans' business, companies getting all-time high profits and great opportunities for future growth. The situation is even better if you take into account that such a profitable venture is being funded by the U.S. budget, not the companies themselves. By the way, income taxes paid by individuals make up the federal government's single largest revenue source, around 48% of all the budget, while corporate taxes are only 7.5%. So, now it should be pretty obvious that politicians give away $50 billion of hard-earned money of American people to Ukraine, one of the most corrupted countries in the world. And this is just in 2022 year alone. And 2023 will surely be no different as Joe Biden screams that U.S. will support Ukraine as long as it takes. Why not to support your citizens with such pile of money that struggle from constantly growing prices? Now you should understand that the war could have been prevented and hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. The Western politicians weren't interested to stop the conflict. Biden's claim, made on March 27, 2022, right at the time of peace talks, doesn't seem like a peaceful statement at all.
For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
There was also an opportunity to stop it back in April 2022, but after the visit of Boris Johnson on April 9, 2022, all peace talks have been stopped even though Russian and Ukrainian negotiators appeared to have tentatively agreed on the outlines of the following settlement. 3 days after Johnson left for Britain, Putin went public and said talks with Ukraine had turned into a dead end. So-called independent Ukrainian government and man of the year Zelensky himself had sacrificed people to please the Western governors. I suppose this award and worldwide recognition is worth thousands of lives. This is what happens when you let an unexperienced comedian to decide the fate of the millions of people. Time should pass to completely redistribute and seize markets and make it impossible for Russia to get back. The funds for the war for 2023 have already been allocated, and with plans to provide Abrams and increase production of munition by 2024, the war is no close to the end. The prediction is made with an assumption that U.S. won't drag NATO into the war. I believe that even amazing profits cannot overtake huge risks that may appear during a war with a county-owning nuclear weapon. Rich people want to stay alive and enjoy their money anyway. I expect that the war's supposed to last at least by the end of 2024. By this time, the process of market transformation will be fully completed, and it will be more beneficial to go back to stable and predicted business environment. We should see a peace agreement signed shortly after the U.S. election to be held in November 2024. As a result, Ukraine will lose territory and become a neutral country. Ironically, that could have been achieved prior to the beginning of the war, but no one was interested. Millions of people that left the country due to the war will stay abroad. The economy of the country will be devastated and it will take several decades to rebuild. Russia will get the control over some territories it already included plus guarantees of NATO Non Expansion. But in the end, it will lose the huge European market and may turn into a regional level country due to the lack of money flow that was previously available to fund army and political projects.